On this episode, Tom Doyle, author of Ringo, A Fab Life.
Okay, today's guest is an acclaimed music journalist and author. Over the years, he has been responsible for key magazine profiles for Paul McCartney, Elton John, Yoko Ono, Keith Richards, and U2. Here to chat with us about his book, Ringo, A Fab Life, let's say hello to Tom Doyle. Hello, Tom.
How you doing, Rob?
Very well, very well. So this book is so much more than a Beatles biography. I mean, it covers his career in new interviews you conducted, and obviously, since the Beatles appeared on Sullivan in '64, probably the most influential band of all time. But with his early health battles, that could have easily been a very different band without him.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that people forget about Ringo, is that Ringo might not have been here because he spent his 7th birthday in a coma. He was suffering from peritonitis, and then also when he was 14, he was back in hospital for another year with tuberculosis. And so these health things with Ringo were kind of to dog him down the years as well, particularly the stomach stuff. Which wasn't helped, obviously, when he started drinking lots and lots of brandy.
Right.
But, I mean, that's the one thing about Ringo, man. I mean, you look at him now, and I mean, he's super, super healthy, So, yeah, from this sort of strange, impoverished background, I mean, he certainly rose and rose and rose.
Right, and obviously, kind of a strange way, but it kind of developed, while he was ill, it developed a passion for drumming. I was reading here, using some makeshift drum instruments kind of during his illness. So that kind of gave him time to really get interested in that. Yeah,
totally. Well, I mean, he told me that actually what used to happen when he was in hospital for the second time was that, he'd already been interested in drums. He was kind of transfixed by the sight of this tom-tom that was in a music shop window. And then when he ends up in hospital when he's 13, 14, there's a nurse, right, arrives basically, who is a music teacher every week. And they hand out these instruments to the kids and stuff like that. And he always insists that he has the drum. And this is a really vivid, he talks about it quite a lot, actually. So it's obviously quite an important memory for him. And, she would sort of point to shapes, on a board, right? And if it was, say, yellow, you hit the drum at that bit. And that's it. He was absolutely hooked. And then when he got home, he filled a tin full of nuts and bolts, and he had some crap bass drum thing that he'd managed to acquire somewhere, which he used to hit with a bit of firewood and stuff like that, So this was a guy who was completely obsessed with drumming straight away, really.
Yeah, and then he went on to play. He played in skiffle and some rock bands, and performed in the Cavern, obviously. And then he adopted the stage name Ringo Starr, I guess, after joining Rory Storm's Hurricanes, from what I read.
Yeah, well, this is actually where he becomes a personality drummer, I suppose. Americans might not know Butlin's holiday camps, but they're a real British tradition, and it's basically where all the working class used to go on holiday once a year, right? And in the ballrooms of Butlin's, this is where he becomes Ringo Starr. He's already wearing the rings, so his nickname is Rings at that time, so it's Rings Starcade, then Rings Starr, and then Ringo Starr. But yeah, even at this point, he's quite a hit with the ladies, because he's quite a dancer and stuff, right? And obviously there's different busloads of girls coming and going every week, but on stage he also has a solo spot called Star Time, where he performs Boys, which he later performed with the Beatles, obviously. And this is, and he starts signing his name, his autograph with a star on it and stuff like that. So really what's interesting is that he was kind of a star drummer locally or at least in Butlins, before the Beatles. And also, the first time he met the Beatles, he kind of thought, he looked down on them a bit, because he was like, well, they were the amateurs. They were just a bunch of scruffs. We were the professionals. So it's interesting to see where his mindset was before he even joined the band.
Yeah, another thing I thought was kind of interesting, starting out with, he initially kind of faced a rejection from George Martin, I guess, when he was first in the Beatles, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't think a lot of people know that. And from what you wrote, he kind of had a little bit of a grudge against him for a while again with that.
Well, you would do, because the thing is, I mean, Pete Best obviously can bear, this is the original drummer in the Beatles, Pete Best, he can bear a grudge against George Martin because he basically got him kicked out of the band, right? But the first time Ringo goes down to EMI Studios on Abbey Road, he massively overplays. He admits this himself. He was so nervous that he just overplayed. And the next week when they went back down, there's a drummer waiting to do Love Me Do, so, and, Ringo's relegated to percussion. So, yeah, it did, for many years, I think, he said that he never quite got over that, but obviously they bonded in time, and I mean, everybody realised just how brilliant a drummer he was.
Yeah, definitely. And the crazy chaos that turned into what would be Beatlemania was just, I don't think anybody was prepared for that. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that again with the mob scenes and people trying to cut their hair and all kinds of craziness. They depict that in the movies, Hard Day's Night, where they're getting chased, but that really happened.
Oh, totally. And the thing is, I think Ringo loved it, actually. I think they all loved it to start off with. But I mean, if you look at the first trip to America, when they arrive at the newly renamed JFK, and I suspect they might have been drinking on the plane or whatever because they'd been told what was waiting for them there. Ringo looks a bit drunk, actually. They all look like they've been on the whiskey and cokes, right? And they barrel into this press conference and they just absolutely attack the media with jokes, right? And I think this is the moment, not only that the Beatles earned their reputation, obviously there's Ed Sullivan soon to come, but I think Ringo earns himself a reputation as being like cuddly, cheeky. He's the smallest one of them, so it's this press conference and stuff like that makes Ringo's reputation. And then Beatlemania, as you say, I mean, it was just, he told me, he said it was like a mushroom cloud went up and we were it, which is kind of a very Ringo way of putting things. I don't think they can get their heads around what happened, really.
Yeah, just a crazy, crazy time. Definitely so much going on with that. And another thing I read, I think a lot of people maybe don't remember, a lot of places they played in the South, audiences were still segregated back then for performing.
Oh, yeah, and they refused to do that, didn't they? Yeah, that was it. They refused to play in front of segregated audiences. Yeah, they got a lot of shit pretty quickly, actually. I mean, it turned really quickly. I mean, if you think about 64, it was like, wow, the Beatles, by 66, I mean, they were kind of hated. It was after John Lennon's thing, Bigger Than Jesus and stuff like that.
Right, that definitely got them a lot of difficult press for coming out with
absolutely.
that.
Well, I mean, that was Lennon. You kind of get the point, right? But I mean, obviously, he's put it in a way as to offend, right? Hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people, right? So, yeah, but I mean, it was a bit much, because like the Ku Klux Klan were coming out against the Beatles. Now, the thing is, if you've got a lot of racists coming out against you, then I would say that you're doing something right. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there you go.
Right. Well, they say any publicity is good publicity. You know what I mean? You had that in the 80s with the metal bands, with churches coming out with that. So, and anything to get their picture on a newspaper, definitely.
Yeah.
But then also, so in 65, he married Maureen Cox, and they got a nice mansion in Sunny Heights. Can you tell us a little about that also?
Yeah, so I mean, at first they were living in Montague Square. There's a whole chapter in the book about that because this is in the centre of London, basically, and Maureen couldn't get with it. It was all the fans, little bitches, she called them, just being really horrible to her, actually. And he was obviously away on tour or in the studio. So they move out to Sunny Heights, and it's really funny, because he has his own pub in the house and stuff like that. He's really, I mean, these are the days when, rock stars didn't really exist. They were like the first rock stars to have a load of money to buy, a country pile. And you've got to remember that Ringo grew up I mean, I stood in front of the house that Ringo grew up in, and it's tiny. I mean, it really tiny. 2 up, 2 down, and a toilet in the back, you know. But yeah, so he's got his own pub by this point, the Flying Cow Pub.
Yeah, I don't think people remember. These were people that came from really, really small upbringings, right? Definitely, that went through all this. So let's talk a little bit about some of their musical innovations. So they re-recorded Shea Stadium performances for clarity, and then they started experimenting with psychedelic sounds, which kind of put them into a new category, a new era, almost reinventing them.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, Revolver really is the moment when all this kicks in. I mean, there's a little bit of it on Rubber Soul, but Revolver's where it really kicks in. I think Revolver, they always said that was the marijuana record.
Right,
and
right.
Revolver was the acid one, right? That's where they all, bent their minds. And what's interesting about that, I mean, if you listen to the sort of progression of Tomorrow Never Knows, it's also a progression in how drums are recorded, right? So Jeff Emerick, I mean, not to get too boring about it, for people who aren't drummers, but Jeff Emerick was a real rule-breaking engineer there, and they weren't allowed to put microphones anywhere within 2 feet, right? It had to be 2 feet away from the kit and stuff like that, because it's these expensive German microphones and stuff. And yeah, Jeff Emerick just basically went, right, none of that, man, and moved all the mics right in. So close micing is invented there. And also he encouraged Ringo to play loads harder. So from that point, that's where you got that thump. And then in the control room, Jeff Emerick is compressing it, right, so that the sound is really punchy. And that basically invents the sound of modern rock recording, So, yeah, there's a lot of innovations made on that record, and Ringo seemed to like acids. I mean, he tried it in LA for the first time, and I mean, he just said, he loved it. I mean, the funny thing was he said, I'd take anything, and you just think that's pretty funny. You don't even know what this shit is, man, but it's like, John and George have told him, we had a wild night out on this. We ended up the bag of nails and we thought the elevator was on fire. And he's always like, obviously like, great, give me some of that.
Yeah.
But then the trip goes on too long. So, I mean, he was the least psychedelic, I would say. But then he's a very art-minded and dreamy-headed sort of soul. So the idea that he was interested in acid and enjoyed himself on acid is no surprise, I don't think.
Yeah, and some of the other things obviously culminated in Sgt. Pepper's, which is obviously heralded as the biggest, probably influential album next to the White Album from the Beatles. Just so many different things on there. And what I read, I guess they were friends with Hendrix at the time, and he actually heard some of that album before it got released.
Yeah, well, McCartney always talks about the fact that they went to the Savile Theatre. And the record had only been out a few days, and Hendrix opened, right? And we've got to remember, Hendrix was the coolest thing in London at this point, right? Because the Beatles were still seen as being naff a bit, like cheesy. I mean, obviously post-Pepper and stuff like that changed. But yeah, McCartney has told me as well, right, when I've interviewed him, that was a big moment for him, right? They went to the Savile Theatre to see Hendrix, a gig that was promoted by Brian Epstein, and yeah, basically he opens with Sgt. Pepper. I mean, their minds were blown, actually, because it bestowed upon them a certain level of cool, which was maybe a gap, actually, in their coolness at that point. Yeah, so, yeah, unbelievable, really.
Yeah, definitely a groundbreaker album. And another one with also a lot of tensions obviously tied into it, the White Album, with a lot of tension from what's been very, historically known as Yoko Ono's presence, starting in the band, starting turmoil and tensions in there. And what I read, Ringo temporarily left the group at that time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he was having a hard time at that point, actually. I mean, they'd all gone to Rishikesh at the beginning of 1968, and Ringo's always seen as being the least spiritual Beatle because he came home after 2 weeks. Maureen didn't like the insects, he didn't like the food, so he took a suitcase of baked beans with him and he'd finished those. So he had to go home, right? That's kind of what everybody sees as being the thing. But actually, he still uses transcendental meditation every day and uses a mantra that was given to him by the Maharishi. So not the least spiritual Beatle. But when he gets home, he gives an interview that's very telling with this guy called Ray Connolly of the Evening Standard. And he just basically sounds depressed. I mean, he's like, you know, I'm not a great drummer, I know that, and I don't really want to get any better, and blah, 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 right? And he's privately turned around to Maury and he said, you know, I think I'm going to leave the band, right? But this comes to a head, basically, when they're recording back in the USSR, because Paul is needling at him, right, about the beat. And Ringo just cracks up and says, fuck this, I'm out of here, right? And then goes on holiday. And so, I mean, they all left the Beatles at different times, but he was the first, which is quite surprising. But when he comes back, you know, obviously there's the famous story with George Harrison's had his kit festooned in flowers and stuff like that. Welcome back, you know, and they're all, you're the best drummer in the world and all this sort of stuff. And actually the White Album from that point on becomes much more of a band effort. And they do things like Your Blues, you know, in a cupboard and Helter Skelter and all this sort of stuff. And that, for Ringo, is when he's at his happiest, is when he's playing with a band. So yeah, from that point, White Album, he was absolutely in his element.
Yeah, and then a lot of other tension started to grow in the band. Obviously, in '69, with Lennon, you know, announcing his departure, and then McCartney's anger at Ringo's diplomatic efforts caused a rift affecting their friendship as well.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? So Let It Be had been, you know, long in gestation or whatever, you know, and they had Glenn Johns trying to mix it and stuff. McCartney had made a solo album in secret, basically, the McCartney album, right? He basically wheeled...
right, and Ringo got elected to tell him not to put it out.
Well, this is what it is. Yeah, it's just like, look, you know, move your record because we're not moving Let It Be. Right, and I've actually interviewed both of them about this, right? And Ringo's pretty breezy about it. McCartney still gets really fucking annoyed about it, actually.
Yeah,
right?
how did Ringo get elected to do that? Is my
well,
question.
I think he elected himself, actually. Yeah. I think he saw in the entry and he knew what the letter was, and it had been signed by John and George. He hadn't signed the letter, but he thought, I can't let just like a mail boy take this round. But yeah, McCartney basically told him fuck off, right, and threw him out of his house. And they didn't really talk for about 2 years actually after that. So it was quite a serious rift. But I mean, obviously one that's been repaired. I mean, it's like a brotherly thing, isn't it? I mean, the Beatles were really brothers in all but blood, you know. So
yeah, and then he went on, obviously, he had, you know, solo projects, you know, pursue his solo career, including, you know, some jazz as well in some of his solo efforts also.
Yeah, well, I mean, he does like his, you know, I was about to say a swingers album. That's a very different type of album, right? But he does a swing album, right? Yeah. And, you know, it's basically, it's all the songs, you know, Sentimental Journey is all the songs that he would hear being sung by his drunken parents. That's what he said, you know. And it's interesting, actually, because when I interviewed him a couple of years ago, and this wasn't a question that I had written down, but it was just as we were doing the interview, I said, see, when the band split up, did you never consider just joining another band as a drummer? Instantly he said no. And I thought that's really interesting psychologically, because by that point he saw himself as a screen actor and a singer. Right? And I mean, you wouldn't really say, oh, well, Ringo, you know, maybe you should, you know, rely on your golden tonsils, you know, for your future living, right? You know. So it doesn't seem like the most obvious thing for him to do or whatever. But yeah, so he does that. And then the next thing, he makes a country record. But the thing is, with George's help, he's putting out these singles that Don't Come Easy and Photograph and stuff. And these are big hits, huge hits. I mean, either eclipsing the Lennon and McCartney and Harrison solo hits or rivaling them. And nobody would have put money on that. It's like, who's going to have the biggest singles, right? Or the solo Beatles? Oh, I'm going to put, you know, £10 on Ringo.
Right.
It happens, man. And by the time of the 73 album, which is just called Ringo, I mean, he's kind of flying commercially. It's amazing, really.
Yeah, and then he collaborated with Paul on some songs and acted in films like That'll Be the Day. Yeah. And what else did he do here? He performed Boys, which drew criticism for the lyrics on that. Definitely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, so with the McCartney thing on that Ringo album, basically Ringo manages to reunite the Beatles on record, but just not on the same track. So George and John record "I'm the Greatest" with him in LA, which John had written, and then Macca gets wind of this and basically, I think he maybe feels a bit left out, or at least Ringo certainly said, look, everybody else is involved. It'd be a bit crazy if you weren't, and that's how it happens, But yeah, there's lots of things. I mean, I devote in the book a chapter to 10 different films that he made. And I mean, most of the films, being honest with you, are shit, right? But the stories behind them are always really interesting. I mean, it's like, how did he come up? How did he come to be Frank Zappa? I mean, he dresses as Frank Zappa in 200 Motels,
right?
Which is a bloody awful film, That'll Be the Day, meanwhile, is a brilliant film, right?
Yeah, really Caveman is another film that really didn't do very well, that he did.
Yeah, I mean, there was lots of films that didn't do too well. Son of Dracula was a turkey.
Right.
Listomania. I mean, I think it did okay-ish, but Ringo plays the Pope. And, you would think any casting director looking to cast the Pope would go, oh, I know, Ringo. But I suppose that's why you enjoy doing it as well,
Of course, definitely an interesting choice for sure. So he continued, unfortunately, with some of the health struggles, with through the, like you're saying, excessive drinking, partying. In '79, he underwent surgery for severe intestinal blockage. Very scary.
Yeah. Well, this was the point where, I mean, I think really the early 70s, his drinking and drugging was just partying, really. But then by the late 70s, he'd also become really quite wealthy as well by this point, because all the Beatles' assets were unfrozen. And so they were all suddenly had loads more money than they'd ever had. And I think he grew bored making records. And he said, I was just more interested in getting out my head. But that unfortunately, he didn't stop making records, though. So he's making records and sometimes singing vocal takes when he's drunk and stuff like that as well. And, God bless Arif Mardan, because, I mean, some of those late 70s Ringo's records are really, they're tough going, basically. He sounds like he's phoning them in or whatever. But yeah, when we get to 79, I mean, he's living in Monaco and it's getting out of hand, basically. And yeah, he just collapses, and it's the old peritonitis stuff really coming back to haunt him again. And so he has loads of intestine removed and stuff. But what's funny is he recuperates in the bar of a hotel, not drinking, right? I mean, it just shows you, because he was quite a sociable guy back then, still a sociable guy if you talk to some of his buddies. But yeah, so he's there, he's not drinking, and he's not smoking, but he's lighting other people's cigarettes for them, just for the buzz of that and stuff. And before long, he's back on the booze and back on the fags, so tough stuff, man, yeah. But as I say, the fact that, I mean, it got worse after that. But he did get clean, and he made it stick, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. So when we rolled into the 80s, obviously we had the, earth-shattering assassination of John Lennon, deeply affected everyone. I think a lot of folks still remember where they were when they heard that news, like people used to remember, where they were when JFK was shot. I think a lot of people look back at that time in history. Obviously, super emotional for the fans, but very emotional for Ringo, obviously. A lot of emotional interviews, and he did some protective actions also, I was reading.
Well, this is it, absolutely. He was the only one of them to actually fly to New York and go and visit Yoko at the Dakota. The thing is, I mean, Ringo and Yoko got on pretty well, actually, because like the others in the late 60s, he was sort of like, what's she doing here, right? And he says this to John, he takes him aside. And then John explains, well, it's like you have to go home and tell Maureen what you've been up to all day. Yoko knows what I've been up to all day. And Ringo kind of accepts this. And Yoko, I mean, I've interviewed her too in the Dakota and talked to her about Ringo, and she was like, well, he was the first one that I knew anything about even before I met them, because Ringo is Japanese for apple, which is a bit weird anyway, So anyway, I mean, it is really, isn't it?
Right.
But anyway, so Ringo shoots straight there as soon as he can, obviously. And he is just kind of disgusted by the fact that there's fans down in the street who are shouting up, Yoko, come at the window, and even Sean, come at the window. I mean, man, he's 5, and his dad's just been murdered. So yeah, I mean, there's always a distaste for sort of the more, radical elements of fan base and press and stuff like that when it comes to the ex-Beatles. But that's definitely a big moment. But the thing that's really horrible, actually, and there was footage of this, I found footage of this, is that when they were leaving, him and Barbara Bach had kind of lost the security detail that they'd been assigned, and they have to push through this really scary-looking crush of fans, and you can see the fear absolutely etched on their faces. And you just think this is crazy, right? Because, I mean, they are probably... I mean, that is the sidewalk where Lennon was shot, I mean, the bloodstains are probably under the feet of the
it went
fans.
from a different world, from them being chased by crazed fans to actually some lunatic taking out a gun.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is, And, I mean, fan is obviously short for fanatic as well, so... Right. But, yeah, Ringo's there, but this is a really cloudy period for him because he's drinking a lot. He admitted that. He says, I was in a mess before John was killed. And, there's a lot of evidence. I mean, he appears drunk on TV a few times after that. And I mean, some of that's pretty funny, actually, it has to be said, because he's a witty guy. And even if he's drunk, he's pretty funny, man, But then there's some bits of it are really sad, where he's just overwhelmed by sadness. I mean, there's a theory. I mean, it's not mine. I mean, it was one of my friends. I thought, you've got a good theory there, right? But it chimes with me, right? Which is that the Beatles were all sort of recovering from Beatlemania, with basically PTSD, right?
Right.
Throughout the 70s, and they're all learning how to deal with it in different ways. Some of them very unhealthy ways. And then they're sort of getting over it, and then Lennon is murdered, and they're plunged right back into this stuff again. So yeah, Ringo's 80s were very blurry, indeed.
Right, yeah. But so in 84, moving forward, he went on to host Saturday Night Live, and then he appeared in some TV shows and voiced some children's characters. And then he got into some space-related stuff, and actually some asteroids were named after the Beatles. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Yeah. Ringo loves space, man, right? And there's like a love affair going on between him and NASA, basically. There's a whole chapter devoted to this in the book, so I don't have to go into all the detail because it's pretty wacky shit, actually, right? And not something. I mean, he was the last one to be to have an asteroid named after him, But what a brilliant thing! I would love that, right? If anybody can name an asteroid, I mean, if you can name an asteroid after me. Yeah, there's anyone out there, right? I would like that to happen.
You can't be more immortalized than that, I guess, right? For sure,
exactly,
for sure. So then in '89, it looks like he returned to touring with the All-Star Band, which is kind of what he's known for nowadays, putting projects together with that, touring shows with his friends, and playing with the All-Star Band, which is always a very fun and cool time, definitely.
Yeah, man. I mean, so he gets clean. Him and Barbara both get clean at the end of '88. And then it just so happens that there's this promoter guy approaches him and says, look, I can get sponsorship from Pepsi. Would you want to put a band together and go on the road? And the thing is, apart from the odd gig, obviously the concert for Bangladesh being one of them, he's not really done much touring work, right, or stage work, really. He's done no touring work since like Candlestick Park in '66 or whatever. So he gets his phone book out, and it's funny because I interviewed him about this, and also Joe Walsh, who was in the original band as well, and who's now Ringo's brother-in-law, right, which is really funny, obviously, as well, right?
Right.
But Joe Walsh and Ringo, Joe Walsh said he was calling all these people, he says, and they kept on saying, yeah, and agreeing to do the tour. He says, and at the end of it, he says, fuck, what am I going to do? Right, he says, they've all agreed. And he didn't think any of them would agree.
Right. He thought he had an
yeah, exactly. Which just shows you Ringo's head state. He's not like, of course they're going to, they'll
right, are you going to say no to a Beatle? Right? Yeah, you're going to say no to that. That's not going to be a fun tour at all. Yeah.
But that's the thing. And also, I mean, he's raw because he's newly clean. But what he doesn't do is he doesn't ban alcohol and drugs from the tour, which is kind of brave in a way. So, I mean, there's a few of the guys in that first band, I mean, naming no names, but I mean, we now know that they were sort of battling heroin addiction and stuff like that.
Yeah, what I heard, McCartney bans people from eating meat on his tours.
Yeah,
that's what I hear.
Ringo didn't ban anybody for smoking smack backstage. But anyway, he gets through it. He gets through it, and I think he's obviously a lot stronger for it. You know,
definitely. So moving ahead, he gets knighted in 2018, and he faced some bizarre legal issues over a trademark name as well.
Yes, you're the only person that's asked me about that. Yeah, but that's in the last chapter of the book where, let's just say, I mean, I'll not give it all away, but I mean, there's a particular sexual aid, right, which shares his name, and it's got a ring and an O in it, you know. But yeah, he has to basically take them to court and say cease or desist, you know, because it's just, you know, people are going to think that Ringo Starr's branched out into sex toys, you know, but I mean, it's just... Yeah. It just shows you how bizarre it is, right? I mean, their existences were completely bizarre, and now that there's just like Paul and Ringo left, yeah, they have to face these really odd things. But I mean, that is very funny, isn't it? You know?
Yeah,
I mean,
obviously, yeah, world-renowned names. You know, the last two Beatles left standing, Ringo and Paul McCartney. Paul's shows are still amazing 3-hour shows he's putting on. I'm not sure if Ringo's gearing up yet for touring. I haven't looked and seen. I'm not sure if he's putting dates together at this point yet. But
yeah, I think he's out all summer actually because he just put the album out. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah,
I didn't catch up on that. I've been busy reading your book, not reading his tour notes. So that's what I've been busy doing. All right. So.
I like that. Don't look at that stuff. Just keep reading this one. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. So the book Ringo: A Fab Life. Folks out there, it's available now from ECW Press. Tom Doyle, thank you so much for being here with us, and sharing your insights into Ringo. I appreciate it.
Loved it, actually, Rob. Thank you very much, mate.